Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video and today's topic is going to be very important and very useful, so that's why I recommend you to watch the entire video. Okay, so let's just get started. When you're the defending side in Rook and Pawn endgames, like we can see here, your ultimate goal is to put your king in front of this passed pawn. You don't want this pawn to move up the board and promote a queen, right? But why is this position here drawn? It's because you're going to come into a theoretical drawn endgame called the fielder position. Now if some of you guys know what the fielder position is, it's not going to hurt you if you listen to it one more time. So the way for black to win this game is basically to push this pawn forward and try to promote it to a queen. So in this position, let's just say it's black to move, he would probably check you and you would have to move back. He's going to go forward probably, and just to show you that this position is a dead draw, you don't have to do anything. You can play rook to a8 back, and if he checks you, you can even go to the last rank, to the first rank. The only thing you have to do here is when the king comes to this e4 square, and you can see that the king and the pawn are on the 4th rank, you have to jump with your rook to this 3rd rank. Now what is the point here? Black actually can't really improve his king. He can't go to any of these squares which are, on the 3rd rank because the rook cuts him off. He can't do anything with his rook. If he checks you, you just go back and forth. And finally he decides to push his pawn forward. And the moment he does this, you have to play rook to a8. Whatever black does, for example if he moves his king closer, you will start a series of endless checks from behind. Rook to e8, and you can see that black's king, wherever he goes, he has no shelter, and if he goes too far away from the pawn, you can attack the pawn. So black's king basically, as you can see now, has no shelter. Wherever he goes, you just keep on checking him. This is a dead draw. And we can see a couple of moves ago, this king here had shelter on this square f3. But the problem was, of course, that we had our rook on the 3rd rank, which was protecting this square and taking it away from the king. So this is the fielder position. You just have to remember to put your rook on the 3rd rank, and the moment black pushes the pawn, you go back and start doing endless checks from behind. Okay, so why is this fielder position important for today's lesson? Now we will understand that every time in these endgames when our opponent gives us chance for our king to come in front of the pawn, we will take it because we know that we'll go into a fielder position and it's a draw. Okay, so if we manage to put our king in front of the passed pawn, then it's all fine. But what if we didn't manage to put our king in front of the pawn? And our king, as you can see, is now cutted from this file because of the rook here. Is this still a draw or is white winning? Now just to quickly test you guys, please answer to the question which should appear on the top right corner right now. So what should black do? Black's king can't do much because it's cut off from the file. So we have to do something with our rook. So should we go with our rook behind the passed pawn here or in front of the passed pawn? That's the question. Okay, so let's see what happens if we go behind the pawn. This is usually a good idea, going behind the passed pawn. But let's see what happens here. If we play rook to h2, our opponent is simply going to play king to b6. And when we go and attack this pawn here, he's simply going to move it to b5. And now what can we do? We can just wait. For example, we play rook to b3 to keep an eye on this pawn here. But how is now white going to improve? First he's going to play king to a6, and when we check the king, he's going to go there to b7, one square further. Now the point is that when we attack the pawn, he's going to move the pawn, and he's slowly but surely going to just make his way to the b8 square. Now again, check, he goes further, and pawn to b7. Now this is the position that all of you guys should know, and the technique which white is going to use here is called bridging. Now if we think logically, guys, here, what is the problem here for white? Why can't he promote his pawn to a queen? His king, as you can see, his king is in a way of this pawn for promoting. So we have to move our king away from this square. But right now, if we move away, the opponent's rook is going to keep checking us. For example, if we move away, the opponent's rook is going to keep checking us, and as you can see, we have to protect our pawn here on b7. If we go there, he checks us, we can't attack the rook because our pawn here is going to fall, and this is going to be a draw. So we can't go into action with our king right now, and the thing that we have to do here, we need shelter from our rook. And how to do this? Well, the first very important move is to check the king away. One file away, he can move, for example, to e6, and you're going to see why this is important. Now it's still not the time for our king to go in action, because again, if we go out, the opponent's rook is going to keep on checking us, and we still, we still can't do anything because we have to protect our pawn. We have to go back. So it's not the time for action yet. We have to go all the way back and try another thing. What we have to do here is we have to play rook to d4. Now the point here is that whatever black does, he waits. Now we can go into action, because when black's rook starts checking us, we can see that when we come to this 5th rank, when the rook checks us, we have shelter from the rook. And now whatever he does, we're going to promote to a queen on the next move. Now that's the thing that all of you guys should know. And after all that being said, this method of black here checking from behind is not the right method, because white is slowly going to make his way up, and then he's going to use the bridging method like we saw. So black has to choose another method, another technique of drawing this game, and this is called the frontal attack. Now what is the frontal attack? It's the attack from the front, but it's not that simple. Once you understand it, it becomes simpler, so I'm going to try my best to explain it to you very clearly. Now the idea of the frontal attack is to check the king from the front, from the front of the pawn. And the point is that this king here can't leave the pawn because it's going to hang. And he even can't, play king to a5 when we check him, go one square closer, because again, the same thing here, we can check the king and it can't attack our rook, because again, the pawn falls. So, what can white do here? Not much. In the game, when this frontal attack started, white basically just went to this a4 square, and then he went to the b3 square to hide from the checks. But now what should black play in this position? This is a very typical idea and a very useful one. Rook to c8. Now it's very logical, because you want to go into the drawn pawn endgame. Now if white takes your rook and you recapture, this is a drawn pawn endgame. Because after king to c4, what are you going to play? King to b8. And whatever white does, if he comes closer, you take the opposition. If he goes there, you take the opposition. And it's a simple draw. But what if white doesn't take your rook here? What do you do then? Well, we're attacking white's rook, so it has to move somewhere. And now, guys, as you can see, you just got that c file under your control, which means that you can move your king closer and you're going to come in front of the pawn, which, as we know, is drawn because of the fielder position. Very nice, huh? So this was a drawing method in this game. First doing the frontal attack to the king, and then when he moves back, we just play rook to c8, fight for the file, and we basically draw the game. the players drew like that, they went into a pawn endgame. And here they agreed to a draw. Now this was a very simple example, and I want to show you guys a more complex example, which is this one. White is cut it off from being in front of this pawn. So after king to c5, try to use your knowledge about these endgames and think about which method should lead white to a draw. Now again guys, if you go behind this pawn, it's the same thing that I showed you before. He's just going to play king to b5, and whatever you do, if you check him, he's going to go there one square further. If you attack the pawn, he goes further, and as I've shown you, he's slowly but surely going to come to this c1 square, and then he's going to use bridging like I showed you, and he's going to win the game. So the attack from the behind doesn't work here, and the move that we're looking at is king to e2. Attacking the rook is of course not going to move anywhere else, because then you come in front of the pawn and it's a draw, as we know. So it has to stay on this d file, and it went to the d5 square. Now guys, which move do we have to play here? Rook to g1, preparing this frontal attack. Now there is one very important thing that I have to tell you, that frontal attack only works if the pawn hasn't passed the middle of the board. So if the pawn is still on the, for example, on the c5 square, the frontal attack works. But if the pawn is on the c4 square, the frontal attack doesn't work. And it's pretty easy to explain. I can just show you. Let me just move this pawn to the c4 square like we said. If the pawn is on the c4 square and you start the frontal attack here, then the black's king is going to have enough space to attack your rook and is going to have to move. Let's see. King to c3, and when you check the king again, he's going to go to b3. When you check the king again doing your frontal attack, he's going to play king to c2. And you don't have any space to check the king again or to, take the pawn. The pawn and the king are too far away. If they were, like I said, pawn on the c5 square and king on the c3 square, this frontal attack would work, because you had the option to play rook to c1, and if the king moved closer, you had the option of taking the pawn. But now the king is too close and you don't have that option. You're gonna have to move somewhere, and black is just easily going to win this game. So remember guys, if the pawn is on the 4th rank, then the frontal attack doesn't work, and if it's still on the 5th rank, it does work. Okay, so let's see our position here. Again, here this pawn hasn't passed the middle of the board, so the frontal attack is going to work. Now black plays king to b4 in order to start pushing his pawn forward, but this is not going to happen so easily, because we can start our frontal attack with rook to b1 check. Now again, black can't move to the c3 square because he simply loses the pawn because of this check. And this is of course a draw. So this is the problem here in the frontal attack for the side which wants to win. Here black played king to a3. And now here's another crucial moment for us. If we do the frontal attack, we have to know about this move. When we successfully did our frontal attack here, and we can't do it anymore because this wouldn't be great because of king to b2. Now we don't have anything to do. So when we finished with our frontal attack with the checks, the move to play is king to e3. Now why is this move important? I will tell you right away. The point is that when black pushes the pawn, we basically want to play king to e4 and attack the rook. So again, we played king to e3 in order to attack this rook. Now why do we want to attack this rook? If the rook moves away on the same rank, we can of course go closer and we're going to be in front of the pawn. Whatever he does, we're in front of the pawn, and this, as we know, is a drawn endgame. So he can't move on this rank, he has to stay on the same file to prevent our king from going in front of the pawn. So what can he do? The move rook to d4 check doesn't do anything, we just move to e3, and now what is he going to do? I mean, he has to go back. He has no no good plan, because of course if he plays king to a2, we can play rook to c1, and I mean, what is he going to do? He can't really protect the pawn. So rook to d4 here really doesn't make any sense. So what is the best way here for black to try to win the game? Well, basically staying on the same file. He played rook to d2, and now is the moment to attack the pawn. Now he gives us a check on d4, not a problem, we play king to e3. And now again he has to protect his pawn with king to b4. And what did we learn? When king goes back, we start the frontal attack. Rook to b1 check, king to c4, we check him again. What can he do? He went to this b5 square, and now the simplest win is to just play rook to b1 check again, and the frontal attack is unstoppable here. If rook to b4, trying to exchange the rooks, we of course don't take the rook, because of course this is a losing king and pawn endgame. But we just move the rook to the c file, and again black has no chance. We're just going to move there with our king and draw the game. What are the other options for black here? He can go to this c6 square, which doesn't really help him. But anyways, white here didn't play rook to b1. Very strange. He chose another move and he played rook to h1. It's a pretty weird move, but it's still a draw. Because now after the rook moves to d8, he continued with his frontal attack. Rook to b1, we can see king to c6, and rook back to c1. We wait. When the king comes closer, we again start the frontal attack. It's a complete draw. Now we see rook to d7, and now again a very important moment. Now we have to wait. We have to play rook to b1 and just wait. Wait, for what are we waiting for? We're waiting for black to play c4 actually here. And when he does, we quickly play king to e2. And the point is that on the next move, what are we going to play? What typical idea that I mentioned before? Rook to d1. Trying to exchange the rooks and go into a drawn pawn endgame, or just stealing that file and going in front of the pawn with our king. So again, if he exchanges the rooks, this is a complete draw. Wherever he goes, we take the position and we draw the game. So if he moves, of course, we just go in front of this pawn, and this is, like we said, drawn. So this is really awesome here. But one may ask, why did we wait for black to push this pawn to the c4 square? Why didn't we play king to e2 right now and try to play rook to d1? Well, this actually happened in a game, and let's see what happened. He just played king to e2. Now what is the problem? Now black goes forward with his king, and we start our frontal attack, of course. Rook to b1 check, he goes to a4 square, and we go back to c1 attacking the pawn. And now he protects his pawn with king to b4, we check him again, frontal attack, and king to a3, we attack the pawn, just like before. Now black protects the pawn with rook to d5, and now what is the difference, guys? What is the difference? We've already had this position before, but the king was actually on the e3 square. Now here, what is the difference? If we had our king on the e3 square, then we would have the option of playing king to e4 here, attacking the rook, and like we saw, this would be drawn. But since our king is on this e2 square now, this means that we're actually going to lose. Because if we now play king to e3, we're one tempo behind, and black manages to get this king to b2 move in, and I mean, we have to stay on this file. We play rook to c4, and when the king attacks us, again only move rook to c1, and now we can see c4. And this is just hopeless now for white, because the pawn has reached the 4th rank, and now black again is basically going to win with the technique of bridging. I mean, what is white going to do? As you can see, we can check him, he goes there, we go here, and again this is going to end up with the with the method of bridging. Again, we see this position, and we of course know how to win with black. Now, if you don't know how to win this with black, your homework is to type the variation in the comments, what would you play here with black, and just try to win. But anyways, here in our game, we can see that this is the difference with here waiting for him to actually play c4 with playing rook to b1 and playing king to e2 immediately. Okay, so let's go quickly through this again, guys, because I really want this topic to get in your mind, and I want everything to be clear. So, our king is cut off from being in front of the pawn. Black moves forward. Now we know that we're not going to go from behind, because as we know, black is going to come to the first rank and then use the bridging method. That's why we're going to use the frontal attack. We first attack the rook, make it move, and then we play rook to g1. We know that since the black pawn hasn't reached the other half of the board, the frontal attack is going to work. So now, when the black king moves, we can check him, and he can't do anything basically. We're just going to keep checking him, and of course he can't move there because we just take his pawn. So that's why black is going to go to this a3 square. And now, when you're done with your frontal attacks, guys, what do you have to play? King to e3. You have to be ready for black to play c5, so then you can attack the rook. So now, as we said, black's rook can't, leave this file, because we just come in front of the pawn, so it has to stay on the same file. And now, nothing is protecting the pawn, we can attack it. Now black is of course going to protect it. Okay, first he checks us, no problem, we go to e3, he protects the pawn, and again the black's king moved back, so we can start the frontal attacks again. And he has no chance of, stopping it. And now, okay, this weird move, rook to h1, it's completely alright to just play rook to b1, continue the frontal attacks. It's the best and the simplest. But okay, he played rook to h1, and we can see rook to d8, and again, frontal attacks. King to c6, rook to c1, not allowing black to play c4 to move his pawn forward, because now it would just fall. So now, black, what is black going to do? He played rook to d7, he doesn't have much. And now another important moment, guys. When you have him under control, when the king is here behind the pawn, what do? You don't play your king to e2, you just wait and play rook to b1. And the moment he plays c4, now you move your king. With the intention, of course, of helping your rook to come to this d file and just achieving a draw. Because now, after king to c5, we can see rook to d1, which forces a draw because black doesn't have anything to do. We come into a drawn pawn endgame. In all the examples we've looked, the king was one file away from the pawn. But what happens if the king is 2 files away from the pawn? Is this still a draw, or is it losing for black? Well, now unfortunately the king is going to be too far away from the pawn to hold this game. Now if we start our frontal attacks with rook to d8 check, the king can for example move to c3, and if we play rook to c8, white can easily win by for example playing rook to e1, and whatever we do, it doesn't really, it doesn't really matter. The winning plan for white is to actually go out there with the king, and when we start the frontal attack, he goes to this a5 square. Now what is the point? Because now when we play rook to c8, he has to of course protect the pawn, and when we check him again doing our frontal attack, now he can basically go to this a6 square, and when we attack the pawn, he can play rook to c1. Now this is only possible because our king is 2 files away. If our king was 1 file away, if our king was for example here, imagine the king being here, then we would be very fast and we would probably have the option to jump here to this d6 square, and we would be close enough to this pawn. But now since we're 2 files away from the pawn, this rook to c1 move is possible, because now if we try to get closer, the king just attacks us, and I mean, we have to stay on this file obviously, and now it attacks us again. The only move is rook to c8, and the pawn starts moving forward, and we have no chance of drawing this game. For example, king here, check, king has to move somewhere, again check, king has to move, king to b7, and this is absolutely winning. Black can't move with the rook of course, because now we just promote to a queen, and also he can't move the king anywhere because we just we just take the rook. So when the king is 2 files away from the pawn, the frontal attack also doesn't work. Now what did we learn? If our king is cut off from the pawn, and if the pawn hasn't passed the middle of the board, if it's still on the, for example, on the 4th rank here, then we can use the frontal attack. And our king of course has to be 1 file away from the pawn, not 2 files like we can see here. So knowing about the frontal attack is really crucial, because it's the only method here that draws the game. Any other methods like we saw, for example methods with going with rook from behind, doesn't work because of bridging, and so on. If anything was unclear, please write in the comments guys, I will be very happy to answer all your questions. So yeah, if you found this video useful, please subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll see you in the next video.